Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News. Video number 2 for the day. I've been wanting to read this article for a while. This is from November 9th, 2018, from Counterpunch, The Colonial Logic of Geoengineering's Last Resort by Elise Lane. As panic starts to set in about what little time we have to avert catastrophic climate change, elites have begun in earnest to drum up support for geoengineering fixes, including the fix of injecting sulfate aerosols into the stratosphere. The basic idea behind this relatively cheap, cost-effective technique is that we could replicate the cooling effect of volcanic disruptions. Like the sulfur emitted by volcanoes, the aerosols would reflect sunlight back into space and thus briefly spare us from the disastrous effects of rising temperatures caused by our fossil fuel emissions. This last resort, advocates say, could ultimately save the planet and thus save humanity. While we figure out how to effectively and cheaply remove carbon from the atmosphere, one could take great comfort in this aspiration to save humanity. After all, it seems we will not, in the time required, rise to the occasion of shutting down petrocapitalists. However, advocates' unspoken presumption that all humans would, of course, want to pursue this last resort indicates that a more cynical aspiration is at work, for it is precisely the kind of presumption that one makes when one is steeped in the colonial logic that produced our climate crisis. Indeed, we should pay attention to how freely the champions of sulfur injections and other equally radical geoengineering fixes speak the language of the universal subject, that creature of colonialism whose benevolent claims about what was best for humanity, often framed in the discourse of economic as well as scientific objectivity and rationality, masked his exercise of brute power over non-Western people and over Earth herself. He is speaking to us again now, promising to save us all, while intending primarily to safeguard Western civilization, because Western civilization is what he really means when he speaks about humanity. In fact, he believes that saving Western civilization is the same as saving Earth, and that Earth is not, in and of itself, worth saving if we are forced to leave fossil fuels in the ground. That's the implication, anyway, of his insisting that we continue to extract and burn fossil fuels up to the point where we will eventually have to turn to the last resort for our survival. It goes without saying that others will need to be sacrificed to do this, to this greater good. Indeed, it almost goes without saying. The men and women who are trying to sell us the solution of sulfur injections tend to be strangely silent on the fact that these injections would disrupt the Asian and African summer monsoons, reducing precipitation to the food supply for billions of people, as Alan Robach and other scientists reported in a 2008 paper published in the Journal of Geophysical Research. The authors of a more recent study published in Nature Geoscience indicate that while sulfur injections would likely cool the Earth, they would also reduce global rainfall. The effort to resolve our climate crisis in this manner is itself an extension of colonial logic. After all, as Heather Davis and Zoe Todd explain, colonialism, especially settler colonialism, which in the Americas simultaneously employed and twinned processes of dispossession and chattel slavery, was also always about changing the land, transforming the Earth itself, including the creatures, the plants, the soil composition, and the atmosphere. It was about moving and unearthing rocks and minerals. All of these acts were intimately tied to the project of erasure, that is, the imperative of settler colonialism. If history is any indication, the last resort might very well be Western civilization's final act of colonial violence. Exclusion and erasure, first of the peoples and sentient beings it has always exploited and disregarded, then, and no doubt unintentionally, of Western civilization itself. Earth will survive this madness. It will rend and swallow and churn into fossils, bridges and buildings and books and bunkers. It will heal and balance and produce new life forms. Hardly a trace of Western civilization will remain, and what will remain won't matter at all. To save ourselves, we cannot resort to technologies that are steeped in the logic of coloniality. Instead, decolonization, along with the attendant earth-healing technologies, must be both our first and last resort. We must be determined to live for one another, not at one another's expense. We must let go of humanity altogether and refuse to accept as well as live by the premise that Western civilization must survive at all costs. Good stuff. Hope you all enjoyed that article. I agree wholeheartedly with everything this article is saying. You know, the problem is that we will most likely have to do some kind of engineering of some kind. I don't know if it's aerosols or what, but we won't survive the coming apocalypse. I don't know, you know, if she's talking about letting go of humanity altogether, if that means letting go of the human race, I don't know, or the concept of humanity. You know, it's a very complicated thing. Like, our humanity, our humanitarianism on some levels causes obviously a lot of damage, and we see the extension of capitalism and all of its, you know, safeties and all of its standard of living and all of its, you know, the good life, and have all these things, and we see that as humanitarian in nature, when it actually is wholesale destruction on a lot of levels. So, you know, it's very complicated. It's a very complicated subject, right? Because, you know, we also think that humanitarian aid is a good thing, and, you know, I struggle with it. I struggle with this concept myself, because I believe personally that we should be embracing ancient cultures and basically indigenous cultures and ancient ways of living and being as a, you know, as a counter to our industrial civilization. And, you know, all of these ancient indigenous cultures don't have all the things, you know, they don't require the sustaining of a certain lifestyle. The lifestyle is, you know, we live off the earth. We are more animalistic. We are closer to our animal nature than our, you know, human intelligent, whatever you might call that. And I'm not saying that it's not intelligent to live close to the earth. That's the thing, is we might have to redefine what it means to be intelligent. We might have to redefine what it means to be rich, what it means to be human on all levels. Because what we define as humanitarian right now, or humanness right now, is very, very twisted and sick in a lot of ways. Man, I've talked a lot about this article already, and I think what I'm going to do is just keep it short and end this video right here and now. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Also, I wanted to say really quickly, I've been trying to put out a couple of videos a day, and what happens is one video gets a lot of views and the other video, whether it's by YouTube's fault or just, you know, whatever, people don't get the notifications about the other videos. You know, watch what you want to watch, but one of the videos that has the least amount of views in the last couple of weeks is the video about the Woolsey fire being started on a Rocketdyne plant, being started where basically where a nuclear reactor melted down at one time, and where there are lots of hazardous chemicals stored. So the Woolsey fire basically was most likely toxic in so many ways to be extremely frightening. So that video, that's what that video is about. So if you want to go back and see that video about the Woolsey fire, I highly suggest you go watch it. It's probably one of the more important videos that I've done in the last couple of weeks, and it should have way more views. So thank you so much once again for your time, for your viewership. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.